so sick.
Ooh, honey.
Seriously? I'm sick.
Oh, honey, it's time for Dayquil Severe, honey. It's maximum strength cold and flu medicine with soothing, honeylicious taste.
I love you, honey.
And I love
I meant the Dayquil.
New Dayquil Severe Honey. The soothing, honeylicious daytime coughing, aching, stuffy head, fever, power through your day medicine. Use as directed.
Not that long ago, we worried what we looked like before we got beers. Where we'd go to get those beers, who would be there drinking those beers. Didn't so-and-so date so-and-so? You think they'll be okay drinking beers with so-and-so? Not that long ago, drinking beers seemed almost complicated. These days, it actually feels more like it used to. If you're getting beers, call a few close friends for the original light beer, Miller Lite, available for delivery. It's Miller time. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories, 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces.
So good afternoon. I want to thank you all for being here, for being present mostly. And I know that there are people who are online. We're not going to pay any attention to them, although welcome wherever the camera is. And I've asked those who speak to speak from the heart and not be afraid to cry. And as you sit in your seats, I'm going to cry. You can cry. It's okay. This has been a life cut short, a shocker. Oh, si bezimatya vayahi Shua. Oh, si bezimatya vayahi I'm going to ask Mom and Dad to come up and share some information about David that we might not otherwise have access to, what he was like as a child and the kinds of things that he pursued before we all knew him as an adult.
I'm Diane, and I want to tell you about David when he was born. In 1972, he was very shy, if you can believe that. He started reading at 3 years old. When he entered kindergarten, they had no idea he could read. First report card we got, the teacher said, he already knows some of his letters and can pick out a 3-letter word. So we talked to the teacher, and we explained, and she tested him, and he was immediately moved to the 3rd grade class. But that was David as a small child.
Well, if you can't hear us, holler. Anyway, so as you can probably tell, when we packed Monday morning, we did not come prepared for this. Nevertheless, with the two of us together, going to try to tell David's story. We're going to kind of do this as a tag team so that if one of us falls apart, the other one can step in. We've also given each other permission to interrupt as we go forward. David grew up in a community in California called Palos Verdes. It was a very close-knit community, but very non-Jewish. And of course, with his brother Rob, and Pythagoras, Tinkerbell, Captain Hook, and Winston, the 4 pets that were with him over the time that he was there. He went to the University of California, Berkeley on a merit scholarship where he obtained his bachelor's degree. And during his first year at Berkeley, he came home, I don't know whether it was his first trip home, but it was the first year, and he came out to us as being gay, which was quite a shock for us.
Mainly because he had many girlfriends.
Which we actually finally realized were girls who were friends. And then on our 25th anniversary, which we celebrated in our backyard, David said, "Oh, by the way, I have found the love of my life." And one of our friends turned to him and said, "So what's her name?" And he said, "So what makes you think it's a she?" And that's basically how he came out to our community. So from there, he stayed at Berkeley and continued on working on his doctorate. During that time, he was the educational director at the Synagogue Shar Zahav in San Francisco, which, as I learned yesterday from reading a piece of Greg's dissertation, was a very early and very prominent synagogue organized by gays and lesbians to provide them a comfort zone that they really could not find in much of the rest of the traditional Jewish world. And he married Greg in 1996 on the Berkeley campus. The ceremony was performed by our cantor from our home synagogue, who was gay and sort of closeted. He came out to people as he knew them. Our rabbi would not do the service. His position was he would do the second one, but not be the first. So Sam performed the ceremony on the Berkeley campus. I tried.
Just minor bickering. Then a few years later, Yanai was born in 1998, who is our son, and his mom is Kathy Simon, and his other mom was Inbal Kashtan of blessed memory. And they came to David and Greg and said, we'd like to have a child, and they agreed. So we now have our oldest grandson. David got his PhD in history in 2001. He came to Denver, DU, to be an assistant professor of Jewish studies. Then in 2005, somebody else, Karen, said, I would like to have a baby with you guys. And we now have Sasha, Alexandra Mayrav Drinkwater, also in the front row. And a few years after that, Karen met and married Dawn Weber. So Sasha, lucky girl, now has, I almost said it. She has 3 parents and 10 grandparents. And at her bat mitzvah 2 years ago, everybody was there, which was really an amazing thing from all sorts of religions. So it was quite spectacular. And 2 of the grandparents are right here, Greg's parents. He became the director of Jewish studies at CU and the Singer Chair of Jewish Studies, and then the chair of religious studies. He wrote, co-wrote, and/or edited 8 books. To me, the most significant, and from reading comments that people have made, absolutely the most significant was Queer Jews, because it sounds like it has helped so many people come out. He has a blog called Radical Jewish Traveler. He was a photo exhibit curator for, what's it called? Soviet Jewish photography, which was amazing. He is a singer, and today on Facebook, there is a post of him singing in Yiddish, which I've gotten so many comments about. They had no idea he could sing, and they were crying. They said it was so beautiful listening to this with Julia Eisenberg. 2 years ago, we came out here to hear him sing in the Denver Gay Men's Chorus, and that was, no, it was last year, and that was amazing. He's been working on Art is My Weapon with Julia about Lynn Yaldate, who was a singer in the concentration camps, and hopefully.
Let me remark about Art is My Weapon. What he and Julia did is they created a 70-minute multimedia performance, which included their singing, it included photographs of her, it included a narrative of the history of her life. So it was really a multimedia educational thing, as well as entertaining. And we saw it performed several times. Once
He's traveled the world. He's lectured in North America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australia. And he was just an amazing human being. That was very special. That's it.
Well, after reading all of the posts in various social media and emails about all the things he did and he was capable of, the only word that I can think of that describes him is he was a real mensch. And so many people loved him and admired him. And we'll miss him.
didn't know David could sing either. I saw him walk into the High Holiday Choir rehearsal at when they have around. I thought, must be another education class going on here because this is the choir rehearsal. But no, there he was. Who knew? I would like to ask Michelle and okay, very good. Okay, and Sasha, if you'd like to go next. When was your bat mitzvah? Last year? Like a month ago? It feels like. It feels like. Thank you.
Does this work? I don't know. Oh, that works. Okay, that's on. Hi, I'm Sasha, his daughter. Everybody knows that. I just want to say a few words about him. David, my papa, my role model, my teacher, and my life. David was a light in every life he touched. He was always happy and optimistic, even in the darkest moments of his life and my life. For the people who saw him in his last months or last days, I ask you not to think of him as a patient, but as the person he was and is. Many of you know that I traveled the world with my dads, and one memory came up for me. We were in London, I think about 3 years ago, and David and I spent the day exploring and eating. Greg was giving a talk to rabbinic candidates, like he does. We went to Buckingham Palace and we waved to the Queen, and we got fish and chips at a local pub. We then had the most amazing cappuccino I've ever had at a small cafe. And if you don't know, I love cappuccinos, and David loved cappuccinos. But what really stood out to me was when we went to the Imperial War Museum. There was an exhibit about the emotions of war. And you walked into this room that was pitch black, and there were war sounds all around you. It was like 3D sounds. And I just got terrified. I froze up and I basically ran out of the room. And then you went through this hallway. It was really small, but it was filled with light. The floor, the ceiling, the walls were all lit up with a bright, radiant light. And there was David. And he was standing in the light. And he was my light. And he'll always be my light. Thank you.
Wow. I'm just feeling that image of the light washing over. Go ahead and go there. Look, the light is not extinguished. It's still shining. We make it continue to shine, and the way that we carry on that energy. Would the next speakers like to come up? Thank you, Sasha.
I'm Michelle. I'm Greg's sister and David's sister-in-law. I feel like nothing I can say would be enough to express the devastation I feel over the loss of David, who I loved us so much and is gone too soon. I feel like there's nothing I can say that would be enough to explain how I'd never met someone like him, so kind and good and deeply committed to a better, more just, more kind, and more inclusive world. He had a magical, magnetic personality, immediately making anyone he met feel a friend right away, making them feel heard and valued. I don't think I really need to say out loud that he made an impression on the world and he left a legacy that will last well into the future. I'll remember David in so many ways. He's left our family better for having known and loved him. He was always the calm, patient voice in our sea of, let's just say, less patient. He was always willing to be silly, not really caring who was looking, and he made us all laugh. There are too many good memories to count, but I'll always cherish our family travels together with David, Greg, and Sasha, especially to Ireland 2 summers ago. I can still see David's leg attached to his red shoe hanging out the window of the ruin of my grandmother's childhood home as he climbed in to look for any small item or memory we could all take back with us. I remember the record-breaking heat wave that was happening while we were on the coast, and David threw off his clothes to jump in the water and swim at the beach. That was a really wonderful trip. In his underwear. So, dear David, rest in peace. It will be hard to live in this world without you, but we'll take comfort in each other and the good that you've left behind.
I'm Margaret, Greg's mother, and David's mother-in-law. I remember like it was yesterday, the first time we met David at the Colorado Springs Airport. Little did we know that day, the love, joy, and hundreds of memories we were about to experience in our lives. I remember David and Greg's wedding. What a glorious day that was in the warm California sunshine among the redwood trees in Berkeley. I remember David's graduation when he received his PhD. That was the first time we met Inbal and Kathy and Yanai, who was just a toddler. What a fine man he has turned out to be. I remember David's 30th birthday dinner at an Asian restaurant shortly after they moved to Denver. There was this big, really long table. It was all crowded with friends. Dennis leaned over and whispered in my ear, "We've lived here for over a decade, and we couldn't find this many friends to come to a party." So yes, David had friends here, all over the country, and in fact, all over the world. I remember the day Sasha was born, and she brought Karen and Donnie into our lives. She was a Thanksgiving baby, and we have been thankful for her ever since. What a beautiful young lady she has become. The memories are so many. We could speak for hours about all the wonderful times we have all shared with David and Greg. I hope these precious memories will help to sustain us in the days to come. Rest in peace, dear David. We love you.
Mishpacha, family. Such a critical piece in a Jewish life. And you described the friends that you were surprised that they were able to amass in a short time. That's also mishpacha, that's also family. And perhaps you all taught us how to build a family of choice as well as a family that's given. Perhaps we'd like to hear from Eli and Adam.
I'm Eli. I'm a friend of David's and a colleague of his at CU Boulder and one of his successors as Director of Jewish Studies at Boulder. And first, I just sort of want to say, as we're here with David's family, that really all of the love and support from the University of Colorado community and really the community of Jewish Studies scholars across the globe is with you in this room today. So we've been receiving just sort of huge numbers of messages over the last few days about David. People have talked about his brilliance as a scholar. He won basically every prestigious award you can imagine in the field of Jewish studies and sort of changed the way we think about the Holocaust, Yiddish, Jewish history, Jewish culture, Jewish art, so many other topics. And people have sent messages about his work as an activist and the kind of large and small acts of kindness that transformed lives. But what I want to sort of just do right now briefly is give voice to another group who I know mattered so much to David and whom he loved deeply, and that's his students. I have heard from dozens of students over the last few days. One told me that David taught them not just about Jewish history, but about what it means to be a citizen and what it means to pursue justice. Another student told me that David gave them the courage to share their work publicly, that it was David who taught them that their scholarship and their ideas mattered for other people. Another student pointed to the space on their bookshelf and in their office devoted just to the books that David either wrote or the books that David recommended. A group of 3 students gathered on Zoom and talked about how they sort of found learning with David to be so rewarding that they just took class after class after class with him. It's sort of so much so that they had to pause in the conversation and look at one another and then look at me and reassure me in their words that they weren't David groupies. And one student just reached out to me. This is a student who had never taken a class with David, but had heard stories about him and knew how much he meant to the community. And this was David. He was a teacher, he was a scholar, he was a community builder, and he was someone whose love and excitement and passion for learning and justice really transformed everyone around him. We are, I know, so grateful for the time we had with him, and we'll miss him more than we can put into words.
I was sitting, my name's Adam Rovner. I was David's friend and colleague. Obviously, David meant a great deal to me. He was responsible for helping launch my career, for which I'm eternally grateful. I'm grateful for his friendship and for knowing his family. Greg, Karen, Sasha, who I've known since she was a toddler, Dawn, his parents, and I just met. That circle of love has been profoundly important to me. In addition to his collegiality and his warmth, I'm grateful for that. It's not easy to make friends when you're in your late 30s. David and Greg became powerful friends to me, and that has been a blessing in my life and in Jessica's life. I have many wonderful memories of David, of course, his family, and extended family, and extended family, his constellation, as I like to call it, around my table at the holidays or at his house. And that is going to be a profound loss for all of us. And in my life as a scholar, he was a model for me. He was a mentor to me. And in that way, I know I'm just one of many, many people. But David was one of a kind. Thank you.
I asked Greg to give me the answers to a few questions, or prompting questions. And so we've been getting a picture of a scholar, and I wanted to give you a little bit different picture. Red shoes. Red shoes. Many stylish hats. I thought maybe we'd see some of them show up today, perhaps at Shiva. Always doing yoga, randomly. Did you ever get embarrassed by that? Oh yeah, okay. So in the airport, usually people that do yoga in the airport are trying to give you a flower. I want you to join Hare Krishna. But here's David doing yoga randomly in the airport or shops or restaurants or anywhere without hesitation. And he wasn't self-conscious about it, but I guess you guys were. Very nice. In red shoes. In red shoes. You probably know this. This is more academic. He spoke 6 languages. 6. But I'm just blown away by that. The singing, his writing. He loved big, loud Russian symphonies. What concerned him was seeing other people sad. So to take energy from that, being corrective of that, I think if he were allowed around this week, if he were here this week, he would be incredibly sad to see what has been happening and the stress that people are feeling and the fear. Were there any sayings he was fond of repeating to you? I always ask, are there any bumper stickers? What would be the bumper sticker that you would put on your car? And I guess he would say to Sasha in Russian, I'll bet you can still repeat the phrase. That's a good bedtime shema, I think. That's a really nice bedtime shema. He didn't like shopping very much, although he did have red shoes. So I don't know how you get those unless you go shopping. Amazon. Okay. Okay. He loved Empress Grey Tea, not from anywhere, from Fortnum and Mason in London. No matter where you go in the world, there are people who are connected to him. And I imagine that that's true because I've just seen the Facebook posts that we're here, we're over here, and there's Sasha. What will you miss most about him? What will you miss most about him? So the rabbi is supposed to bring the Jewish aspect to the funeral, but I don't really have to do that since he was chair of the Department of Jewish Studies. But I did want to tell you one thing that told me about his character and his Yiddishkeit. So you probably know that the family are all members of the B'nai Havurah. And he's there for a religious school. Sasha's enrolled in a religious school. And I'm giving a lecture, I think, about Shemitah, about when do we not plant. And I made a mistake. I gave some information that was inaccurate. He didn't point it out to me at the time. He pointed out to me later, quietly, on the side, which is exactly how you're supposed to do a criticism or a suggestion so that you avoid embarrassing the person. Because there are those parents who are like, "Nuh-uh, Rabbi, I know that it's a different answer." And that reminded me so much of the section in the Torah where Tamar has pretended to be a prostitute to get her father-in-law to sleep with her. Long story short, as they're about to go out and kill her, she makes it clear to him that he was the one that slept with her. Not that she had been fooling around, but that he was the one that had done it. And he says, thank goodness, he says, "Hitsid kamimeni." She is more righteous than I am. She did the right thing. And I feel like that was a real lesson I learned from David. Smiling. I will miss that smile. And authority without being in your face about it. I remember seeing him introduce a novelist in the basement of the Tattered Cover. It was funny. He had an incredible sense of humor, but not one that had to take center stage. But you have the sport of a family and an extended family. And so now y'all that are sitting here are part of that and are part of watching these two folks grow up. You're part of their spirit guides. We don't really have those in Judaism, but I just created it, so there it is. I'm a Reconstructionist after all. He had an ability to show how proud he was of you for just being you, not what you accomplished, not what was framed on your wall, not what you could do for him, but who you were, who you had the courage to be. And I think that I always ask my congregants to think about what was the energy that person put into the world that's no longer in the world because now that person is gone. And that you continue that energy then. It's Aleinu, it's on us to continue that work. And it's usually one or two things. That it's a good thing there's lots of you here because there's lots of things to continue to put your energy into. Craig, would you like to give remarks? Thank you.
I'm Amy.
I was one of David's first students at the University of Denver. And I met David at a time when I was just searching for validation, I think. I had massive imposter syndrome. And I remember knocking on David's door after I was first in his class in Russian history, which I had taken in high school. And so I was excited to sit with someone and talk with them about Russian history. And a year later, less than a year later, I declared a history major right before I became a senior because David and I had talked about a really cool project I could do going to NYU to look through microfilm letters that Trotsky had written to American Trotskyists. And I brought my data back, and we had this really great talk about my data. And I said, I'm really overwhelmed. And he said, Amy, Trotsky just had his head up his ass. That's what you need to write about. And so I left that day, left his office, and I was really excited. And I said, have a nice weekend. And he said, Amy, it's only Wednesday. But I was just so invigorated by our conversation. And when I moved to Boston to go to graduate school, David and Greg visited us. And David convinced Mark and me to stop waiting to move back to Colorado. And when we moved back, we met Sasha and Greg, and Karen. And we just spent some time with their family, which was so amazing. And then when I was writing my dissertation in sociology, I reached out to David because I had so much data and again, didn't know what to even do with it. And he said, I'll meet you on Sunday, this was Friday, at a coffee shop at St. Mark's. And he sat with me for 2 hours and just told me that the direction I was going was the right one and that my data was really good. I think we're all just sort of searching for validation sometimes. And I think David gave all of us that at some moment in our life.
Hi, I'm John, and my partner is Ramsey. And I just wanted to share something that David invariably shared when we were asked how we had originally met. So we were fortunate enough to know David for 20 years. And since we're somewhat unlikely friends, I'd also like to share with you the story of how we met. We were a group of 20 or so mismatched gays, and we were taking a big trip to Africa that a mutual friend had organized. Some of us were meeting at the airport for the very first time. David saw Ramsey and I over sitting off to the side of the party boy contingent, reading old copies of The Economist. David and Greg saw the options in front of them and immediately made a beeline over to introduce themselves to us. To this day, I'm grateful that Ramsey and I chose to pace ourselves ahead of a long flight. The four of us and Ed Bronfen have been close friends ever since that trip. Although David was obviously a great scholar and quite likely the smartest person in the world that any of us will ever meet, he never acted in a manner that was intimidating or condescending. Many of you have spoken about David's many accomplishments as a son, a partner, a father, a mentor, and an academic. I will always admire him for his humility and his humanity. To me, his greatest accomplishment was his ability to be a humble and caring friend. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Neil. I'm friends with David and met him through my husband, David. And I didn't prepare anything, but I just wanted to get up here and express my deepest condolences and give my heart to the entire family because he was a really special guy. And I'm kind of a newer friend. You know, I guess I've known David and Greg maybe 4 or 5 years now. We've shared a lot of great times. And I'll just remember David as a super kind, gentle. Jim, you said it best, he was a mensch. It's the only word you could think about for him. Super smart, super handsome, just a really, really nice guy. And I'll always remember David for the twinkle that I saw in his eye. He always had this twinkle, and it was a twinkle that I read as, you know, his super intelligence, but also just his super kindness, that he was willing to be friends and be open to anybody and listen to you. And, you know, just a good guy. So I'll remember that twinkle. And I just want the family to know that, I think you said it, you have a village here, and please use the village. My parents lost a son at 46, my brother. So I know what it's like. And I love you, David, and I love you. We're just here for you.
I'm Anna. This is my wife, Fran. David. I first met you 17 years ago when a mutual friend connected us because, of course he did. We were both queer, Jewish, tenure track faculty who had moved to Denver from California, and at the time both at DU. And shortly thereafter, you and Greg had Fran and me over for Passover Seder. We would share nearly every Pesach after that at the Queer Seder, and even when you and Greg visited us in New Zealand. Over the years, you became more than a friend. You were our mentor, confidant, family. We were so grateful that our son Jeremy had you and Greg as role models, and that Sasha could be a sister to him. In our times of need, we turn to you for your keen insights, often delivered with humor, on parenting, international travel, navigating academia, working with a publisher, and living Jewishly in Denver. But more than your wisdom, more than your incredible intellect, we appreciated just having your big heart and bright light as a part of our world. We will miss you so very much. We love you.
My name is Ed Bronfen. To Sasha, I'm Dyadya Ed, which means Uncle Ed in Russian. And this may come as a surprise to Jim and Diane and to Rob, but David was my brother. And you were my parents, along with Greg, and Sasha is my niece. We haven't done 23andMe, but I found out that David was my brother on that trip that John talked about in Africa. And on New Year's Eve, David and I walked down to this little town in a suburb of Cape Town and had champagne and strawberries on the beach and watched the fireworks. And I realized then that not only was David one of the most special people I'd ever met, but that although we might not share DNA, he was my brother. And I'm so grateful that I had him as my brother, and Greg and the entire family have adopted me. There are two things I want to tell you about David. John already mentioned one, and then another. There's so much to say, and I want to leave time for Greg, but John nailed it. David was the smartest man I've ever met. And I say that without reservation or hyperbole. He was the smartest man I ever met. Yet David was the least pretentious person I have ever known. David did not have a molecule of hubris, of being self-impressed, of needing to be the center of attention. To the contrary, he did that to others. And that was something that always stuck with me. David also taught me many, many things, but among the most important was a sense of peace and serenity and acceptance. Never once during the years of the tumor and the recent events did I ever hear David fetch or say, why me, or this is unfair, or anything. He taught me a sense of inner peace. To my brother and my family, I grieve with you, and David will live, as with you, David will live with me in my heart for the remainder of my life.
You know, you have another brother in that case.
Wow. Oh, I know. Absolutely. That's another nephew.
Thank you, and I'll be brief because I want Greg. My name is Jamie, and I worked with David. He hired me as assistant director at the Center for Judaic Studies, and we went on together at CU. It quickly became apparent that David lived in an energy that I often told him, I'm like, you have a flow of life unlike anybody I know. And it made it such a magical experience, so much so that we would often like dream these big projects that we wanted to do. And like the next day, we'd get an email for an unsolicited opportunity to apply for a grant to make that come true. It happened multiple times, and it was magic to be around. We worked together for 10 years, but he has been my friend for 16. He has also been my brother. At a recent, very difficult time in my life, taught me what it means to forgive and to heal. And I want to share a lighter story. I sent it to Greg this week. We were also bike riding partners. He got me back into road biking. We rode a couple of rides, benefit rides together. And last spring, it was our last ride at Lookout Mountain. And long story, but we had gotten separated, and he sent a couple of other riders to catch up with me and let me know that he was waiting for me back. And these gentlemen came up to me and they said, I think you might be riding with that incredibly fit man back there. And I looked at him and I said, oh, you mean the GQ model that I'm riding with? And they're like, yeah, that's the man. He was so much. I'm so grateful So grateful for his life. So grateful for what he taught me. He made me always want to reach higher, be better, and be more. And I love all of you. I love you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing him.
So I'm Greg. David and I first met 26 years ago, co-writing a travel guide to Germany, of all things. So I'd like to say our first date was 6 weeks traveling around Germany and then Eastern Europe. And we built a life together that changed me immeasurably. So as many of you know, David was a dreamer and an optimist and a radically extroverted human being. He gained energy through others. And I'm the opposite. I'm very much sometimes pessimistic and anxious and very much an introvert. And he helped me shift that and see the value in sharing my life and building life with others. And the example I want to give is when we got married in 1996. It was back when the debate over marriage equality for gay people was just beginning in the country. And there were many people who saw marriage for gay people as sort of heteronormative and buying into a patriarchal system and wanting to get married just to have state recognition. And why do we need state recognition? You know, those are some of the arguments that people might have made. And others who wanted a more radical vision. But David found a way to embrace marriage with a radical vision, which was that he saw it as a brit, as a covenant between me and him, between us and God, between us and the Jewish tradition, but most importantly, between us and our family and our community. He didn't want to get married because he was caring about recognition from the state or society or approval from anyone. He wanted to get married because he wanted to shout our love from the mountaintops to all of you and invite all of you into our lives. He saw the marriage ceremony as an opportunity to expand our family, to expand our community, to expand our love, to share all that with all of you. He said as much at the ceremony, and he's lived that every day. I also just want to read a few quotes. As many of you know, many people have written beautiful things online and sent me emails and texts. And I gathered together a few that were just very meaningful to me, just to give you a sense of some of the comments that people might have made. Scholar Josh Myers said, David was an incomprehensibly generous and kind person. Scholar Rachel Gross said that she pursued Jewish studies in part because David's writing made her want to join the conversation. Friend Scott Myers asked that may his memory be a revolution. Rachel Haverlock described him as having capacious brilliance, a sense of driving action, a clear vision, and that he was a partner in extending the possible. Chabad Rabbi Yossi Serebransky wrote that David was one of the first people to truly see me. One of the first people to truly see me. I think a lot of people feel that way about David, that he saw them, he saw who they were, and he supported them and encouraged them as Yossi felt. Gay rights activist Mordecai Levovitz wrote that David's loss is a loss to the entire community of queer Jews who owe David a debt of gratitude that goes as deep as our own sense of collective dignity. His contribution to every queer Jew is invaluable, as his work helped us construct the identities that we celebrate today. He lives forever in our destinies. There are many more, I'll share them during Shiva, but I just wanted to give you a taste of what David meant to friends, to colleagues, to family, to all of you with whom he and I created a brit, a covenant. Thank you for being part of that.
Life after death. These things I know how the living go on living and how the dead go on living with them. So that in a forest, even a dead tree casts a shadow, and the leaves fall one by one, and the branches break in the wind, and the bark peels off slowly, and the trunk cracks, and the rain seeps in through the cracks, and the trunk falls to the ground, and the moss covers it. And in the spring, the rabbits find it and build their nest inside the dead tree, so that nothing is wasted in nature or in love. Family, will please rise for Kaddish. In the tradition of our congregation, those who are the mourners begin the Kaddish, and we join them in support with our own voices after the first section. You can choose to rise or remain seated as you feel comfortable. Yit Kadal, Yit Kadash, Amen. Yalma Divrach Chite, Yamlich Malchite, Hayachon, Vayomechon, Uvchaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, Agala, Vizman Kariv, Ve'imru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarach, Ve'olam U'almei Almaya, Yitbarach Ve'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar Ve'yitramam Ve'yitnaseh, V'yitadar Ve'yitaleh Ve'yitalal Shmei B'Shah B'richu, Le'elam Kol Birchata Ve'shirata Yushbechata. Chaim Aleinu Ve'al Yisrael. Amen. Ose shalom bimromam, hu yase shalom aleinu, ve'akol Yisrael, ve'imru, amen. You can be seated. This ends the official portion of our funeral service. David will be interred in Ranchos Palos Verdes. And yes, yeah, there were so many people. No, I want you to come and do it. But please make the announcement about what's going to happen between now and then.
Okay. So hi, I'm Karen Aviv. I have been a co-parent with David and a friend for 20 years. And there were so many people who wanted to sign up for Shmirah to sit with David before he leaves for Los Angeles. So we'll have additional slots for people to come to Feldman's to stand watch and accompany David starting at 4 o'clock today through Sunday at noon. So I will send out the Shmirah sign up on Facebook again. And if folks would like to participate in that sacred mitzvah, you're welcome to sign up. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. May his memory be for a blessing. I don't know how to say revolution in Hebrew, but yeah. May his memory be for a revolution. Thank you. You need help, Tim?